Think of the welfare system, the welfare check, the typical welfare recipient. Think about the bumper sticker on the back of a car that says, "Work hard, millions on welfare depend on you." Now forget everything you think you know about the subject. It is a lie. Here are the top 10 things you probably don't know about the welfare system. Number 10, it was meant to take single mothers out of the workforce. Under President Johnson's Great Society, the initial purpose of the modern welfare system was to get single women out of the workforce so they could stay home and take care of their kids, so they wouldn't fill the jobs up that men needed. He also referred to it as a form of reparations for slavery, since he viewed a lot of black women as getting it. But that isn't how the deal went down exactly in Congress once implemented. Number 9, it was incredibly racist and broke up black families. Written into the rules of welfare were rules such that white women could have access to welfare, while black women had a harder time getting on welfare or ended up getting less. There were laws in many states to discourage blacks from getting on welfare by asking invasive questions, such as how often they had sex. They would also do a good housekeeping test to see if the woman was an unfit mother by using a white glove on a surface of her house and turning her down for welfare. Since the welfare check required you to be a single woman, many black families were broken up by it, as when they hit poverty level, the dad would have to move out and live alone, and couldn't be seen around the family too often, or the mother could lose that much-needed welfare check. Welfare officers would do midnight raids and search the house, and if they could claim that there was a hint of a man being there, such as a belt, they could be kicked off welfare and sued for fraud. White women were never subjected to these treatments, nor this level of scrutiny. It wasn't until the early 1970s that black women were finally given the same rights to welfare that white women had, and that was when welfare in general began to come under its most scrutiny, and single women denigrated, especially in the 80s when the direct racism was becoming less acceptable. Number 8, the welfare check as we believe it hasn't existed for 22 years. This should actually be the number 1 thing, but the rest of the things don't actually make sense in the narrative of this video. Most of the funding for welfare was massively slashed in the 90s, and instead of following the belief that women need to get out of the workplace and raise their kids, the new mantra became "everyone works." Not a bad idea on the face of it, but implementation was awful, and with these women being pushed into the workforce, along with NAFTA, which displaced some labor, Chinese markets opening up, which displaced 5 times that, and automation killing even more jobs than those two combined, the demand for wages dropped, and so did our wages. You now have to work at least 20 hours a week to get welfare benefits. Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, or TANF, which is the welfare check everybody refers to, is only available for 2 consecutive years and 5 years of your entire life. If you've exhausted your resources and can't move up beyond minimum wage labor, homelessness is your only real option. This impacts children, veterans with mental health issues, and the elderly the most. Number 7, you all get welfare. Welfare money grew from the early 70s until the Welfare Reform Act. The scope of welfare got switched to 4 purposes: help needy families with cash assistance, help people get back into the workforce, and 2 others, help prevent out-of-wedlock childbirth, and help prevent divorce. The data used for it was shoddy at best. What they ended up doing was slashing the welfare check and pumping about 75% of the money into a block grant that became a slush fund for the state to use pretty much however they felt necessary. And the states don't really have to rationalize how they spend it at all with research. In Oklahoma, they use the money to fund couples therapy for even upper middle class people. In Michigan, they use it for kids for college. 6% of that money goes to grants to upper income students. Neither of these are bad things for a state to fund. In fact, they're great, but not at the expense of people who can barely get by. In Indiana, they use them to fund crisis pregnancy centers with a distinctly pro-life agenda, many times tricking mothers to wait too long past the time that they can legally get an abortion, while pushing pro-life ideologies on them and directly lying to them. This is not something a state should ever fund. There is a link below on how your states spend welfare dollars, and you may be on welfare too. Number 6, most people are on welfare temporarily. 1/3 of all people who use public benefits are on it for less than 1 year. 56% are only on programs for a year and a half. Only 43% hang on to welfare benefits longer than 3 years. This of course does not include TANF. These are people working minimum wage, or people in areas like Appalachia or ghettos where jobs will never return to them and there is little to no hope. but it is the only place they can afford to rent, and they don't have the money to move. Oh, and if you've ever been in prison or an immigrant, you can't get welfare benefits either, so many people in these areas who can't find work because they're felons who serve their time are being helped by family members if they're lucky, which is also a massive drain on families, which helps keep them in poverty. Number 5, it's really hard to cheat the welfare system. The welfare department was last found to have a 97% efficiency rate. That means 3% of all welfare funds are wasted or gotten illegally. This may seem like a huge amount, but as any organization goes, 3% is microscopic compared to, say, the massive amounts wasted on overhead by charities. But, if you look at the numbers, just thanks to massive scales of the program, it seems like so much waste and fraud. Perspective is everything. Number 4, welfare is cut off too soon, creating a cycle of poverty, and in some cases, suppressing work. Many people are so ashamed to be on welfare, they forego it until it's too late. This causes them to have all their resources exhausted, and they have problems with transportation and basic living to try and get themselves back out of poverty. Plus, we cut off welfare at a certain stage way too low, so many either don't bother getting off welfare unless a really good job comes along, which is becoming rarer and rarer these days, or they get off welfare, something comes up, knocks their fragile budget off balance, and they're back on welfare again. Remember, these are people who are working 20 hours a week long term. Many forego raises or hourly increases because if they were on minimum wage, there's no way they could afford to live without the benefits. In Europe, people are given bigger safety nets for this very reason, so that once they're off, they can stay off, and getting a job won't wreck their fragile budgets further. In expensive areas, you can get reduced housing for $40 a month if you're listed as being in poverty. Get a full-time job and your rent can literally go from $40 to $1,000 a month overnight. Number 3, means testing is just a little less expensive than giving welfare to everyone. A lot of money is spent on deciding if you qualify for government money. It takes a lot of time and manpower and forms and lawsuits to decide if you deserve welfare, and they sue people who don't deserve it. Drug testing is an even bigger waste as drugs are expensive, and if you're on welfare, you probably can't afford drugs. If they loosen the rules, more people would get it, but it wouldn't cost much more because they wouldn't have to pay as many welfare workers. The same is true with higher education. The amount spent on means testing for grants and work-study programs themselves in the U.S. costs almost more than the amount spent on higher education spending overall. Removing that middleman and making college free would kill some jobs, but would make college a lot more available and a much smarter, way less stressed population if we also negotiate down college prices. A guaranteed basic income would have the same impact, or just give everyone food stamps, which ensure we all have equal access to food, and while it would require, say, an automation tax to ensure we all benefit from losing our jobs to machines, much of that means testing money would go directly to the citizens as opposed to being spent on people trying to decide if you deserve it or not. Number 2, very little of your money goes to welfare compared to subsidies for the very wealthy. For every dollar you give in taxes, 6 cents goes to welfare. If you make $50,000 per year, that rounds out to about $40 to $45 a year to help poor people who either had companies abandon their area, destroying jobs like coal companies in the Appalachian region due to demand dropping from cleaner, cheaper power and natural gas, along with automation and logistics. While an average American gives $6,000 of their taxes a year to those same corporations and subsidies, which, if you make $50,000 per year, averages out to around $600 of your taxes going to either state or federal subsidies. Complain about these first, and you'll probably see a lot less people on welfare, because these corporations won't get special treatment in currently not-so-free market, so non-subsidized small and mid-sized businesses can actually compete. The only reason why many of these big companies can have such low prices that small businesses can't compete with is because you've already paid for it through your taxes to subsidize them. Also, remember, most people on welfare are working minimum wage, so those giant companies and being on minimum wage still allows them to get welfare benefits to survive. That means that we're subsidizing the companies with welfare so they can pay their workers even less. Number 1. When done right, welfare can break the cycle of poverty instead of causing it. One of the key ingredients of the free market is failure. You try and fail, and a simple minority of those businesses go on to create jobs for other people. The smaller the safety net if you fail, the more risk-averse you become, depressing entrepreneurship and therefore new jobs. Studies have shown that small businesses and entrepreneurs have been declining, and more small businesses feel like street vendors in third-world nations than Silicon Valley startups. When implemented right, welfare can be used to break a cycle of poverty, ensuring everyone has equal access to education, healthcare, family planning, good public transportation, and the tools needed to move them to a better tax bracket. In Denmark, everyone has equal upward mobility regardless of what tax bracket they are born in. That claim about America we were always taught, but is not even close to the case these days, nor ever was if you were a woman or a minority. Welfare is good. It allows for failure for entrepreneurs. It helps people rebuild their lives after trade or more and more automation destroys jobs and renders them useless. But when it's stripped down for political reasons, it becomes not a hammock, as Republicans like to call it, but a trap that is essentially impossible to get out of, while corporations make you hate those on welfare, while they vacuum up your taxes and subsidies, ensuring no other business can compete with them. If you're interested in more information on this topic, please check out the first season of The Uncertain Hour by APM Marketplace. It covers things about welfare I didn't have time to mention that you probably believe are true and actually aren't. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and comment. I now have a SoundCloud podcast where I post current videos along with videos from the old archives. I also have a blog that I post every week. Thank you.